So welcome everybody. I hope you're enjoying the Historic Homeowner Fair. I'm Corey Edwards. I'm the Deputy Historic Preservation Officer with the city's Office of Historic Preservation. And you have found our Rehabber Club DIY panel. The Rehabber Club is a OHP program. We get the question all the time, hey, I need to start this project and they have no idea who's a good contractor or how to do this. And so we put together this resource that's available at sarehabberclub.com. And you can search through contractors that have been certified through either trainings or experience. And so that is a free resource available to everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel today and just kind of raise your hand when I get to you. I'm starting with Anthony Chen. Anthony began rehabbing homes in 2016 exclusively as an investor and manager. He transitioned from this role to now also to doing a majority of the work on rehabs, primarily in framing and carpentry. He enjoys the process and challenge of major rehabs because it provides opportunity to work physically, mentally, and with other people. In addition to restoring and building homes, Anthony owns Terra Vista Strings, which provides music and entertainment for weddings and special events, and Acropora Holdings, which invests in real estate. On his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his wife, Laura, and helping his family manage a wildlife claim in Spring Branch. Cotton Estes. Cotton launched her practice as an architect in 2018 after a 5-year tenure with Lake Plato Architects. She hails from New England and has been drawn to San Antonio for its vibrant downtown and cultural fabric. Cotton's work takes on a waste not, want not approach to sustainability and is often inspired by the simplicity of vernacular buildings. Her urban infill work in San Antonio has received recognition by the AIA and the Texas Society of Architects. Cotton's first professional experience with a historic home was the remodel of her own home, a small 1914 craftsman bungalow in Dignity Hill. That's how we met. That was probably 10 years ago. Scott Martin. Scott is a visual artist, historic homeowner, and building science enthusiast. He enjoys the conversation about restoration versus renovation and finding the right balance. Scott also runs scottslist.org. You're gonna wanna write that down. And is the recipient of 2 Green Building Awards, including the only preeminent Green Building Award for exhaustive reuse of salvaged materials. So thank you all for being here. I am not prepared with my questions. Are they on there? Okay, so I'm gonna ask the first question, and then while you're answering it, I'll find it on my phone. So I'm gonna ask the panel to kind of respond with what draws you to historic properties, or how did you first get started in historic rehabilitation, starting with Cotton.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. A little soft-spoken, so raise your hand, flag me down if you can't hear me. I would say the first thing I love about working with historic buildings is that many of them were designed before AC was invented, which makes them really great examples of passive sustainability techniques. So prior to the 1960s, people's comfort relied completely on things like the home's orientation, the height of the ceilings, the shade the building provides, and that's just a wonderful starting point for design. So in short, I think historic buildings have good bones and common sense.
Well, let's see, I grew up with, my dad was an architect, so I spent a lot of time with him on construction sites. And I also studied earthships when I was a kid, and I've always had this kind of weird feeling that America's on this like crash course with the way things are being built. And I have always been attracted to historic buildings. I think that it's the materials that I really respond to, and you know, I feel like historic buildings are very soulful, and I want to, you know, I love spending time in them. So I think that's the building blocks that kind of got me started there.
So I started doing what became sorry about that. What got me attracted to doing historical homes was I oversaw a home remodel in Dignity Hill. And after that, I became really drawn to it because I really enjoyed seeing the craftsmanship of what early carpenters used to do, and how they. Can you hear me back there? Okay. And I really like seeing the carpentry of early carpenters, And I also really enjoyed learning from that, as well as seeing the materials, seeing how the project went. And I also really like the challenge of bringing a project that's in ruin back to life.
Great. Why don't you take the next question? Oh. We'll start over. Okay, next question. What is your approach to starting a project? Where do you even begin? And so.
Yeah, I would say, so in full disclosure, most of my work is new construction in historic districts. I have worked on some extensive remodels, rehabilitations as well. But as an architect, context is everything. That's the starting point for our work. We start by studying the existing urban fabric surrounding the site. So this is everything from materials and massing of existing neighboring buildings. We look at view corridors throughout the area and on the site itself. Circulation patterns, existing trees are extremely important, as well as sun and wind patterns across the site. And studying these existing conditions really helps us come up with a strategy for strengthening the urban fabric, contributing to it versus working against it, and finding and leveraging opportunities on site. So I think if this site analysis happens well, it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 equation where you can build on the strengths that are already there to your advantage. Sometimes we find a granular detail during this analysis that can inspire an entire design concept. One example is an extensive remodel that we're just beginning now, and we found it's a 2-story limestone house in King William that's been covered with stucco outside. It's an elastomeric stucco, so it's plastic based. It does not breathe. And same thing on the interior, it's coated on the interior as well. And limestone, when it absorbs moisture, it needs to be able to release it, or else the stone degrades over time. This is the structure of the building we're talking about as well. So this inspired, this problem we identified during analysis has inspired an entire concept, which is just to let this house breathe. The concept is about opening up spaces, exposing and celebrating natural materials within the building, and reintroducing some of the passive sustainability techniques like daylighting and natural ventilation.
Yeah, so I'm just a homeowner like yourself. It's not a business for me. You know, I want to have a meaningful life, and my wife and I don't have a lot of money. So, you know, we looked at emerging neighborhoods, you know, potentially neighborhoods that a lot of people wouldn't, you know, want to live in, and bought a home for not really a lot of money, and it needed a lot of work, and we just knew that we could do the work as we could, and probably, you know, put a lot of sweat equity into it. So, you know, that's how I've started my projects, is just buying homes that I could just barely afford, and just putting my own time and effort into it over time as I can. So, and it's really kind of been a lovely kind of life's pursuit, you know, that it's something that I'm always thinking about. It's something that I'm always trying to plan. You know, I really like reusing materials, and it's kind of contagious, really, if you sort of talk to friends about reusing materials. Hey, do you have any, you know, old lumber? Like, that conversation continues, and over the years I've had people say, hey, you know, I've got some material if you want it, or I've got these old doors that I really don't have any use for. I even had somebody come to me and say, hey, I've got a friend that wants to take down a whole house and wants to demolish it. You know, do you want it? And so, yeah, that's how I have started projects, just to make a nice, soulful house for me and my family to live in.
So the way I get started is, I feel like planning is definitely the most important aspect, especially when you're getting into a major rehab of a historical home. And so the things that I want to study, especially with homes that are in ruin, are roof pitch, measurements, window fenestration sizes, which you know, are the window openings. And sometimes if that doesn't exist because the home is in such bad ruin, I try to ask neighbors, or I try to ask the historical OHP on what the house might have looked like, or what it looked like back when it was built, so that I can have a very clear picture on what the exterior layout looks like. And then from there, I try to get with my architect and my engineer to create a floor plan within the house that is going to respect and accentuate the historical facade of the home. But definitely measurements, roof pitch, materials, that sort of thing is definitely the most important thing, and that's the way that I get started.
All right, so give us some of the tips and tricks you use. What are your go-to resources for either building materials or special products?
I'm gonna let Scott start off with this because you are the master keeper of great resources.
Okay, so I live in Southtown, and unfortunately I'm surrounded by people that are always kind of looking for the right contractors and materials and that sort of thing. And when my wife and I bought our house, we just immediately started asking all of our neighbors, you know, how do you do this? Where do you find these materials? You know, are there contractors that we can hire that are like historically sensitive? You know, because some of the techniques that contractors might use on a historic home are very different than you would use in new construction, and so that sensibility is just so important to find. And so I slowly started this list on a piece of paper of contractors, places to find materials, that sort of thing. And this piece of paper got to be like a monster, you know, it got filled up, and before I knew it, I had people calling me saying, you know, who's on your list for this, or who's on your list for that, and like this little piece of paper, you know, like everybody kind of knew about it. It was sort of weird, and so in like 2003 or something like that, a long time ago, there was Craigslist, and so I registered scottslist.org real quick and just put that piece of paper, all that information on there. And it's a really crude, ugly little one-page website, but gosh, I've continued to update that list for like 20-something years now, and so it's called Scott's List. It's just a list of historically sensitive contractors and resources. So it's very organic. It's sort of a crowdsourced list. It's literally just referrals that have come in from historic homeowners, you know, people they've worked with. And it's, you know, it's both good and bad. Like, hey, I worked with this person, they were great, and hey, I worked with this person and they were terrible. So, you know, that kind of feedback we really need. There's no monetization on it. People cannot add themselves to the list. It has to be referral only. So anyway, that's.
What traffic do you get on that?
You know, I haven't looked at the data recently. It's sort of moderate. You know, let me see if I can remember some of the things. Like, it's something around 10 to 15 visits a day. So it's definitely like local to San Antonio. It's not like, it doesn't get national traffic. It's all very localized to us. And there's a bit of word of mouth. There was an article about it in last year, and that shot up traffic quite a bit. And so anyway, and a lot of people look at the list and draw from it and never contribute. So the one thing I want to say is please, you know, contribute. You know, if you have anyone you've worked with that you really like or don't like, just email the list real quickly with that information, because it's you know, it thrives on that kind of community information.
So I typically source my materials from, there's a place called Picker's Paradise over off of Guadalupe. There was also a place off of Houston Street and Monumental, but I think they went out of business. But a lot of places where I also source materials is, you know, when I do full rehabs on other homes that are not historic, if they have stuff that maybe don't fit the house or they don't fit the neighborhood, I can save those and restore them and bring them to historical homes. Sometimes if I'm just driving around the street and I see people throwing out old wood or old doors or things like that, I'll go pick those up as well. But as far as sourcing materials, sometimes, you know, I'm actually working on a house right now in Monte Vista that's in such horrible condition that most of it is not salvageable. So sometimes what I have to do too is just actually build certain things, like build the window frames, or even build window sashes, or build attic vents or stuff like that that look exactly like what they were, built out of the material of what it was. But sometimes that is the best option, especially to get something that fits the house the way that it fit.
All right, so I'm gonna share two pretty specific materials I've been really excited about. I'm excited to share with you guys today. You know, there are situations, let's say you're building an addition that's slightly detached from your historical home, and you don't necessarily want to mimic the old style of the home, do something that's kind of distinct and respectful of the old home, or you're looking to completely replace a historic porch. However, you can't find the caliber of old growth longleaf pine that the original porch was built out of, so you need to use a new species altogether. There are situations where you're looking for new materials that are compatible with the old. And one product we've been working with a lot is acetylated or thermally treated wood, which is a really amazing non-chemical, non-toxic kilning process for domestic softwood species. So these are rapidly growing species like ash and pine that are treated with this kilning process to perform just like mahogany or ipe, or something really long lasting that you would use on an untreated deck, for instance. And I actually brought a couple samples that I was able to carry on my walk down here today, so I'll put these out if you're interested in touching them later. But it's a beautiful treatment, and it does not require stain or sealing to protect the wood. It is intrinsically protected from rot and insects. Basically, the kilning bakes out the sugars that fungus and insects would be attracted to. So,
Are you okay with passing around?
yeah, for sure. Yeah. The other product is a lime-based paint and plaster system. This is an ancient technique. Goes back to the Greeks and Romans, and it's kind of coming back into favor, and I think it's a really well-suited treatment, especially for our climate, in order to preserve the character of things like masonry and wood, and it's a breathable material, so it doesn't seal off materials that need to breathe, which often old homes do need to ventilate. And I think it's one of the most beautiful finishes because it's alive in a way. You see the hand of the craftsman in it. It will do things like spider cracking, so you have to be, if you're living in an old home, you're probably okay with some, some character coming through. And it has that kind of living finish that just gets better with time. So it's a great material, and I'm happy to say there's a company out of Houston now that's kind of reproducing a lot of old Italian techniques, and we have plenty of limestone here in Texas, so it's a really neat material to consider maybe for some of your projects.
Can you tell us again what that is?
Yes, so that would be hydraulic lime-based plaster and lime paint. And here's some paint samples here. And it's really just a mineral-based plaster and lime.
So the color palette is more limited than like latex-based, because they're not latex-based paint, because they're not using dyes, they're using actual kind of mineral, treated with pigments, natural pigments mixed in. So it is a more traditional color palette, but again, to the point of breathability, if you paint even just brick on your home, that's going to have an impact over time. So
yes, and the color is integral, so it's really not intended to be painted. And when you patch something, you can use the actual material. So there's no flaking over time, or it's a solid material.
Great, thank you. What is the biggest challenge with historic rehab? If you have to pick one, or you can name a couple if you have a couple.
Someone said foundation, yep. I would say one of the biggest challenges, maybe choosing your battles and doing those things well. I think it's really easy. I've fallen victim of this misconception myself. It's easy to underestimate the time it will take to do something properly and thoroughly. Kudos to you all for being here and going to sessions like the window restoration. If you're planning on doing this yourself, you really need to know what's involved before you take on those projects. Too often we see windows that have been painted shut. Maybe someone opens the first window and sees the weights and the strings and says, oh gosh, it's easier just to shut these forever. And that's a shame. So I think if you can allocate time and resources you need to do a couple things well, that may be better than trying to address the whole thing. So there's a lot of time and work associated with rehabilitation done well.
I think one of the biggest challenges is materials. It's so easy if you want to start a project to just go to a big box store and buy stuff and get started. And so I really encourage everyone just to kind of slow down. You live in this house. There's no hurry. Unless of course you're like yourself trying to redo something very quickly. But if you're a homeowner doing DIY work, just slow down. There's no hurry. Try to find the right materials. It's a process where you have to kind of listen to your own intuition, ask around. There are, the difference between using some reclaimed longleaf pine versus like a white pine at a big box store is really huge. And if you're going to look at it every day for the rest of your life, it's just a really profound difference. And the surprising thing is that so many people throw away amazing materials. I had a neighbor a few blocks away that was going to pay $10,000 to demolish this little house in their backyard, and I spent 3 months along with some friends, some of which are here, salvaging that house. And the materials are like super amazing, and I made a bunch of cabinets in my kitchen and stuff that people look at and they're like, wow, this must have cost a fortune. And I just say, it was free for the taking, So materials, that's one of the biggest challenges. But if you just slow down and ask around, you will find some really neat materials that you'll just love forever.
So I feel like I'm going to reiterate kind of what both of them just said, but I feel like the complexity of a historical house, and I don't mean to say that to scare any of you, but some of these homes that are built by home builders that can be built, and framed in a week, on a historical home, to do it the way that it was done in the past, it takes considerably longer to do it right and to do it well. The other thing that I will say, again, just kind of reiterating what you just said about material, is we were in the process of framing this house in Monte Vista, and I was using a piece of brand new 2x4 from Home Depot to frame a wall. When I was trying to get the wall lifted up to the right level, the stud bent and broke. I put an old piece of wood that we had just got when we took the roof off, and it got it right nice and straight, no problem. So anytime actually when I'm doing structural support, I try to use the old wood and implement that into support structures like jack studs and cripple studs, things that are going to be very integral to the structure because it actually works a lot better. But I think what everybody said, that it is going to take time And you know, don't underestimate that, and don't feel bad if it takes you longer than you think it's going to take you.
Great. So, oh no, I lost my spot. Okay. What advice would you give to somebody starting a rehabilitation project?
Again, I think yeah, choosing your battles so you can do those things that are important to you well. I think knowing when to hire an expert like Anthony, or a knowledgeable subcontractor, especially when it comes to things like waterproofing. That's probably the one area I see a lot of misfortune in, and it takes a solid knowledge of building science, I think, to protect these homes. A lot of new construction methods and materials are not suitable for new construction, so things like you have to see open cell spray foam behind window trim. That is not a good
Elaborate.
I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I think finding good resources before you take on the project, doing the research, and
I'll just add, a lot of people see that spray foam insulation and think, ooh, that's what I need. Just do your research, Google negative terms with that Google search and see what you find. There's a lot of new kind of emerging science around the use of spray foam insulation and potentially just a negative health impact as well.
Yep, definitely. I think waterproofing is the #1 area that's easy to fall into some pitfalls there, and it's worth getting experts involved on that sort of thing. Well, foundations. And I would say my other piece of advice would be try not to miss the forest for the trees with these projects. It's easy to get kind of tunnel vision on something you're focused on, and I always advocate for keeping your decisions in context with the whole. So always being mindful of the character of the building, what drew you to the home in the first place, and kind of make decisions based around that total idea.
One of the things I see people do over and over is people kind of focus on the center of the house, the part that you live in. People want to paint or re-sheetrock or whatever, make the sort of living space in the middle of the house really nice the way they want it, and they often sort of try to ignore some of the structural issues, foundation, roof, that sort of thing. So I would really encourage you to take care of the structural stuff first. Everything starts with the foundation. If you don't get the foundation right to begin with, you're going to have to redo anything you might need to do in the middle of the house, so where you're actually living. So taking care of the foundation, take care of plumbing and electrical and the roof. I know that's kind of hard. Those are big budget items that you practically don't see, but it's so important to get the structure down first before you work on the fun part of working on a house.
So the advice I would give, and I would say don't do anything to the exterior of the house without getting a certificate of appropriateness. And I would also say that if you're doing anything major structural or doing a full rehab, do not do anything without getting a structural engineer and without getting an architect as well. I've seen a lot of mistakes that a lot of people have made who haven't done this, and they've had to go back and do it again. So that's my advice.
Okay, here's a fun one. What trend in either construction or design or HGTV trend would you like to see die in 2024?
I love this. HGTV.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about the process. It's easy to fall victim to thinking you can do something in 3 months for $10,000, and realistically, there are a lot of cuts on those shows, and it doesn't often work that way. DIY is tough. I think it takes someone with extraordinary patience and time to take on a big project. I'm not saying it's impossible. I caution against overly optimistic DIY. And sheetrock. Okay, I'll let you take
What,
sheetrock.
get rid of sheetrock? Is that what you said? Get rid of sheetrock?
Sheetrock.
Yeah, in an old house, sure. Not in the new house.
Hard to do. Hard to do.
Yeah, sheetrock, some people call it, I can't say the word.
Gypsum.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, sheetrock, it's, I would like to see sheetrock die in 2024, at least in historic homes. It definitely has its place in new construction and everything, but it's so nice when we choose something other than sheetrock in historic homes. But I actually have a funny story. You know, I've never seen any of those TV shows. I don't really watch much TV. And last month I actually had dinner with Chip and Joanna Gaines, and I had no idea who they were. You know, somebody told me afterwards, like, about them, and I had to Google them. But anyway, it sounds awful.
So I might have a little bit of a different perspective because of the fact that I see a lot of other people doing work, developing on this side. But the things that I would like to see is, you know, a lot of people, even if it's not designated historical, I hate it when people put like that James Hardy siding on old houses or try to put transom windows and turn a historical house into something that it's really not. I really don't feel like they're going to make it look any better than it would have looked had it been built right in the first place.
I'll just say one more thing about sheetrock and kind of issue a challenge to you all, because I think anyone who works in San Antonio knows that our soil moves 8 inches of potential vertical rise and fall in some areas of the city, which is incredible. You imagine your walls swimming up and down 8 inches every year. That's what we're talking about, and sheetrock is just not meant to move. So in a lot of historical homes, you see this beautiful board treatment or old fabric wallpaper. That was a brilliant solution for the movement we have here in town. So it's an open challenge to us all, I think, to find something as affordable as sheetrock, which is why we see it so often. It's very, very affordable. That can move with the shallow foundations you see on historic homes.
Okay, last question, and then we're going to open it up to kind of a general forum. And you've already alluded to the importance of kind of reusing historic materials where possible, for maybe it's free reasons, but also if you were here for the climate session before this one, we talked about embodied carbon and how important it is to work with existing materials versus purchasing new materials. So how often do you reuse historic materials for scopes of work in your projects, or what are some kind of creative ways you've used them, and maybe that wasn't the original intent, or how the materials were originally used, maybe you've adapted them for something new?
Yeah, as often as possible. The challenge often with new construction is finding enough of a historic material to use in a meaningful way. But we've used a lot of wall studs, old longleaf pine wall studs for things like butcher block countertops, and seen the longleaf pine perform better than like a quartz countertop in terms of stain resistance, and you can always refinish it, so it's an incredible material for things like that. And amazingly, I think the longleaf pine countertops we have in our old home are still dropping sap from the bottom, and this was a 1912 home, and those trees were probably hundreds of years old. So hundreds of years later, that material is still kind of alive in a sense, and it's anytime you can find old growth longleaf pine, that is an extremely valuable material to put to good use. We've also used old roofs for fence materials, old standing seam roofs with beautiful hand crimped seams. And we found an old chain link fence that used these mini I-beam fence posts. Extremely cool. They don't make these tiny mini I-beams anymore. We use those as light fixtures and furniture legs.
So we ended up buying our neighbor's house because we didn't want to see it get messed up. We just wanted to treat the house properly. And the first thing we did was we started taking down all the sheetrock. And we discovered that the whole house was built in the 20s during the Depression from reclaimed materials. You know, all the doors were different, the windows are all different, and all the wall board that was hidden behind the sheetrock was from other buildings that had been torn down. We saw a lot of burnt edges on the wood. There were apparently, it was a common thing that during the Depression when a building would burn, often it was like half the building and they would salvage the rest of the materials. So right then and there, my wife and I said, you know, we can't put any new materials into this house. You know, it's got to be all salvage. It was built from salvage materials. And some of the materials in the house had signs on them from the 19th century, just handmade signs and such. So as we, you know, again, we took the project kind of slowly. We didn't know what we were going to do, but as we went along, we kind of, us and some of the contractors sort of fell in love with some of the signs that were written on the wallboard, and so we left that stuff exposed, and it continues to be a conversation piece to this day.
So I try to use any old material, original material to the house as often as I can. And sometimes it's not necessarily used for what it was initially intended. So sometimes, you know, I've had to take the roof off of the house and I've used old rafters to build handrails and put them through the table saw to, you know, make the 1.5 by 1.5 posts. It's more of a labor of love sometimes when you're doing that, but it really makes a lot more sense. I've also used sometimes, you know, the old shiplap that used to tie in the walls. I use that to build like accent pieces, like accent walls, or I've used them to build, you know, accent pieces for behind a kitchen island or something like that, and then seal it and stain it and seal it with polyurethane. It really looks fantastic. Let's see, I also use some of the old wood to build window frames. Not the sashes themselves, but the yellow pine that you get out of the old houses is generally a lot better than what you can buy. And even sometimes it might look horrible. Like it might be completely debilitated with, you know, a bunch of peeling paint on it. But if you just spend maybe 10 minutes and sand the paint off of the wood, it looks a lot better than what you can buy in a store.
Okay, thank you all. We have about 15 minutes, so we're good on time if we want to open it up to anybody for questions for our experts here. Yes, ma'am.
So, Cotton, you mentioned using something besides sheetrock. I have a house that I'm doing that's all shiplap, but of course there's like little, you know, like little seams. What would you recommend? Would you recommend leaving the shiplap there and just painting it? And then how do you fill it in?
Do I need to repeat that? Did everybody hear? Yeah. So the question, she's got an old house with shiplap. The drywall's been removed, but the shiplap has spacing in between, there's gaps, and so she's wondering what the best treatment for that is.
Congratulations on all that shiplap, that's amazing. So your question is on the exterior walls, how to protect the inside of the home from
Correct.
critters and the air blowing in?
Right.
Yep, that's a great question. You might consider deinstalling the shiplap on the exterior wall and reinstalling it so that your weatherproofing barrier would be inside that shiplap, inside the wall cavity. Yeah, that could be wonderful. I would not recommend caulking those joints.
Can I add one thing? Yeah. One of the things that my contractor came up with, aside from the exterior siding and weatherproofing, just with the shiplap you're talking about on the interior walls, You know, the shiplap might have a lot of metal tacks and such in it. So one of the things we did kind of experimentally was we just carefully removed the shiplap on the interior wall, and we ran the backside, which didn't have any tacks on it. We ran that through the planer, and then we put a black tar paper up on the wall, and then we reinstalled the shiplap with the tacks facing inward, right? So we cleaned the backside of the shiplap and installed that facing the inside of the room. And there's little gaps and holes and such, but the black tar paper is behind it, which sort of provides somewhat of a dust barrier, but it also, you just see blackness in those cracks and holes. So just a thought.
Thank you.
I was actually gonna say something similar, that you can carefully remove the shiplap from the house. It's gonna take some time to do. But there's a material called thermoply, which is actually like it's kind of like it's a sheeting material that you can use that basically serves the purpose of your OSB and your tie-back wrap, and you can put that in on the interior studs after you put your insulation in, and then you can put the shiplap back over the over the thermoply, and the thermoply again will provide you the barrier that you need so that, you know, dust and critters don't get inside the house. You can even take it a step further and just tape the seams of the thermoply so that you know, it creates a moisture barrier on the inside as well as on the outside.
No?
More questions?
This is not really a question, but I mainly deal in land in and around San Antonio, large tracts and stuff like that. A lot of times they have an old home on there that they're not gonna do anything with, and they wanna even many times just get it taken off or whatever like that. Is that something any of y'all be interested in, as was reclaiming? If a person sent pictures, I was just curious because y'all like to do reclaimed wood. And matter of fact, my wife's dad, back in the 50s, he built their home, which is over there in the historical district, out of reclaimed wood. Is that something any of y'all would be interested in?
I have an answer. I have an answer.
Sorry.
So not really the subject of this session, but the city has a deconstruction ordinance. And so looking at reusing available salvage materials is definitely part of that program, and really kind of encouraging that circularity of materials. So instead of going one way to the landfill, they're coming back into the market for reuse. And so obviously, all sorts of historic projects, these guys use those materials. But as part of that, we have trained about 20 deconstruction contractors that are certified to do that work. Those contractors' information is on our Rehabber Club website, so sarehabberclub.com. And so if you're interested in having a contractor come out and see what is salvageable and make some recommendations, that's a good resource. But if you have done that, so if you have pulled materials that are salvageable and probably high quality and ready for reuse, and you don't know what to do with it, if you don't want to just put them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, those can be donated to the city. We have a Materials Innovation Center where we can receive those materials, and they go into affordable housing projects administered by the city. And so the city has contractors that are doing those projects. And so we actually just had one where we had one of our deconstruction trainings that removed a house built in the 1920s, early 10s. That siding was removed, went to the Materials Innovation Center and stored there for about a month. And then we had a rehabilitation project that was being done by the city where the contractor was able to go and reuse that siding in the rehabilitation project at no cost. So that's free material, and like these guys have pointed to, it's high quality, so it's gonna prolong the life of that other historic home for somebody. So those are just some resources that are out there. Anything to add? Okay, any other questions? Yes, back here.
I think one of the problems that we all face with historic homes is the cost of renovations. And I'd be interested in, I'm trying to get our home registered as a historic site. It's in South Bear County though, it's not in San Antonio, it's not in a designated area. If you're familiar with the LHI, Land Heritage Institute, my home was built by that Watson's son. My great-grandfather was a Watson, descendant of stagecoach stop, it was the Pony Express relay, it was, you know, that house was the hub of the community of Thelma. Thelma was my grandmother, and it was named after her when the post office was named. I'm trying to get historic designation for it, and I've applied for that, but are there grants available for restoration? It's a big house, it's very, you know, it was built in, they moved in New Year's Day 1905, and it's had a lot of years in the family, a lot of, you know, I'm the fifth, my children are the fifth generation to be raised in that home, and it needs a lot of help.
Yeah, I mean, there are resources for historic properties. If you live in city limits, grab one of the historic home handbooks. That will have information about the local tax incentive for rehabilitation, and so that's kind of city property abatement. It helps offset some of those costs. If you're not in the city, there's other resources. Grants, the San Antonio Conservation Society is a good resource. They have an annual building grants program. So if you have a specific project you want to apply for, they can help fund that. And then through designation, so if you are able to list on the National Register of Historic Places, or if you have a state designated property, which is really specific, but there is a state historic tax credit that is available for most properties. They used to have to be income producing, but I believe there's work to kind of alleviate some of those hurdles, and so that is also an avenue you could explore. But yeah, that's about it. And so definitely relying on reuse is always a good way to cut costs, but when it comes down to it, it really involves kind of skilled tradespeople and contractors that know what they're doing, and again, time. And so as we know, time is money, so they can be expensive projects. And so ask around, and if you want to contact staff, we're happy to help you connect with people that might be able to offer some assistance. There was one, I think you were next, yeah.
Any recommendations on windows in additions to historic homes?
Recommendations for windows to be used in an addition to a historic home. So we have historic design guidelines that have been adopted that speak to the type of windows that should be included. And typically they're going to be windows that are, I don't want to use match, I want to say mimic the appearance of the original windows on your house. And so typically your house is going to have the original wood windows if it's of historic age. So if you do an addition, we ask that you just do windows that are of similar size and operation and style. It is possible that you could be approved for like an aluminum window or a wood window, or an aluminum clad window. There's different products and materials available, but the biggest direction is that you're trying to match an appearance where you can. And so there's a variety of products that can do that, yeah.
What about sources for those?
Well, downstairs in the exhibit hall.
You want to just avoid the big box store versions. I mean, where do you go?
Yeah, so
You want to stay away from the big box stores.
yeah, there's a number of contractors downstairs that can literally build them. If you're looking to use salvaged windows, there were a few resources mentioned here, Picker's Paradise, the architectural salvage places. Habitat sometimes might have a few things. The Habitat, yeah, it's yeah, architectural antiques on the east side. Scottslist.org.
I wanted to offer one kind of fun trick that might be applicable to some of your projects. If you have the chance to reinstall one of these old double hung windows from scratch, like you're rebuilding the weights, inside the weight cavity, sometimes we sleeve those weights in a pipe, something like PVC pipe. That way those weights never snag on things in the wall cavity. You often see old window weights that get tangled up, or the rope degrades and snaps. So we often use steel aviation cable for the weight instead of the cotton string, and then sleeve the weight channel in pipe so that it cannot snag. So it's just kind of one slight update you can make to make those windows last much longer. You do see a thin steel cable instead of a cotton string, so there's slightly different aesthetic, but it's, if you're reinstalling old windows from scratch, that might be something you consider.
And another free option is, depending on where you do your addition, there's probably already windows there where the addition's going, and so those can sometimes be pulled off and reinstalled in the addition. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Right here.
If you have a clay tile roof that's approximately 100 years old, is there an underlayment under it from when it was built? And if so, should that be replaced or only if it's leaking? Do you have any advice on that?
So we've got a clay tile roof with an underlayment question on when it's re-roofed, if that underlayment needs to be replaced or
Well, I don't
different
want to
material.
re-roof it. I mean,
No.
that's my question is, I don't know if there's an underlayment under it right now, or if it was built with one, and whether or not I should have all the tiles pulled off and put an underlayment under it.
Is your roof leaking?
Is it leaking? Yeah.
It's leaking slightly in one spot, and I know that there's at least one clay tile missing. I don't know where it's missing from, because I've had another person up there that took a picture and says, look, you've got this missing. But generally, I don't find that it's leaking, so I don't know if there was any sort of underlayment under it to begin with.
When was it built?
Probably 1923,
Do you have access to the attic?
yes.
What do you see when you look? What do you see in the attic when you look up at the roof?
I see, I don't know if it's boards that I see or if it's plywood that's up there. I think I see plywood, but I have other houses that I've seen where it's actually like
Frosted.
tongue and groove
Some kind
boards
of
or
decking.
something. But
So you've got some kind of decking.
I think I have plywood type decking,
Right.
which to me would be definitely not original.
Right.
Um,
Well, you could always carefully remove one of those tiles and see what's underneath it.
mhm.
But, yeah, potentially, potentially redecking the roof and providing, a water barrier and then re-putting the tiles back. That's a big project, but, that can be a really, nice thing to do in a historic home that makes it ready for the next 100 years.
Just don't break the tiles.
Right.
You're gonna have to have a contractor that's done that before, and once those tiles break, they're very expensive to replace.
And it might be hard to find them, but chances are you can find replacement or newly made tiles that mimic them exactly, but it might take a lot of searching.
Okay, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much.